Hello, my name is Jeff Bennett. I'm a career navigator at Virginia CareerWorks, and I'm the facilitator for Career Essentials. And I'm happy today to be able to do this workshop on creating a resume, something that's a very, very important thing for all of us who are searching for employment or wanting something a little bit better. We're going to just jump right in here today and talk about some basic things that you can do that will help you to create that resume that's going to make a difference and set you apart from other people who are competing with you for that very same position. What is the purpose of a resume? The purpose of a resume, the main purpose is to land that interview. You may be applying for something to where there are 100 or 200 other people that are applying for that position. Okay, so now we have a stack of paper on the desk of the person who's going to make the decision as to who is going to fill that position, and that stack looks something like this. Okay, the goal, the purpose of your resume is to get into this stack right here. Okay, because that's what's going to happen. The resumes are going to be selected, and they're going to go from one big thick stack of paper into a very thin stack of paper just on the other side of the desk. Those are the ones that the employer is ultimately going to be looking at to consider for that employment position. And so that's the main purpose of a resume. You want something on that resume to capture their attention, to show them exactly what they're looking for very, very quickly. And you want to be placed from that big stack into that little tiny stack over here that's going to be considered. Another purpose of the resume is to promote yourself and your abilities. So remember that. You just want to promote yourself and the abilities, the skills that you have, the qualifications that you have for that job. The resume is a professional sales tool. Okay, look at it as a tool. One big common mistake that people have when they create their resume is somehow or another they want to just tell their whole entire life story in the resume. Well, I have news for you. Your whole entire life story is not going to be looked at or considered, okay? This is a tool. Okay, it's a tool, and we have to recognize that the resume it's a very, very important tool. It starts the whole ball rolling, but it is a tool. Okay, and it's a professional tool. The purpose of a resume is to make you stand out from the crowd. What's going to set you apart from all of the other people that are going for that position? All right, so let's take a look at how to start doing this. And a lot of this workshop is going to have to do with your mindset about resumes. Like, what do I need to be thinking about? What is it that I'm trying to do with this resume? Okay, so here's some things to remember. Remember that resumes will be very quickly scanned rather than read. Okay, so you need to find the key words to use and the right place to put them within the resume. Most of the time, there's going to be some sort of a screening process, and the employer isn't going to be the first one. The hiring person isn't going to be the first one to look at that resume. How do you get set from that big stack of paper into that little stack of paper? The person who's doing that, they've probably been instructed by the owner or employer to look for certain things to set you apart. It may be that the person who's looking at this resume is going to take your resume just like this and kind of look down through it. And in that amount of time, either put you over here or put you back on the bottom of the pile over here. Okay? It may be that long, take that long. So you obviously can't read a 2 or 3 page resume in that amount of time. So you're going to have to learn to use that tool to put the right keyword in there to catch the attention of that very first person who's going to be looking at the resume and say, you know what, I think our employer would want to look at this person and take a second look at that person. Okay, that is the goal of the resume, and that's something to remember, that it's going to be very quickly scanned rather than read all the way through. Resumes are advertisements. You want the employer to buy the product, and what's that product? You are the product. So you want to kind of look at that you're kind of selling yourself. So sell yourself. That's the other thing to remember. Let that employer know what your skills are and what you can do for them and what makes you the best candidate for the job that you are applying for. So let's get started with this. So as you get started on actually doing your resume, you want to focus on the employer's needs. What are they looking for? A lot of times you can tell what they're looking for when you look at the job description that's in the search engine. Whether you're using one of the local search engines or one of the national search engines, there usually will be some sort of a job description in there. Look carefully to see what it is the employer is actually looking for. You can usually deduce by looking at that what the key words are going to be in the resume, okay? What makes you that perfect candidate? Think about that as you're doing your resume. What does the employer really want? Do your homework. Oh my goodness. I've interviewed many people, maybe perhaps hundreds of people throughout the years. And the people that don't have a clue about the company that they're applying for, you would be amazed how many people just don't know anything about the company or the job. What are the talents that you bring to the marketplace, especially that job? What are the talents and abilities that you have that maybe no one else has, or you have them better than somebody else? This is a competition at this point, okay? And what do you have to offer that prospective employer? So as you get started, those are all things, and some of them may be a little redundant, but they kind of flow into each other, and you want to remember those things as you get started. So here's a summary of abilities and skills. These are qualifications. This is the first thing that you want to have. Maybe you want to call it an objective statement or a summary statement. This should be probably the first actual full sentence, but it shouldn't be any more than maybe a couple of sentences long. But this is a summary of your abilities and skills. This would be a statement that would kind of summarize your qualifications and the skills that you have for that job. So this summary statement needs to be brief. It needs to be a concise statement or very concise statements to focus the reader's attention on your most important qualities, achievements, and abilities that match the employer's needs. So it takes a little bit of homework, kind of figure out what the employer wants, what are some of the keywords, you don't want to lie about yourself, okay? Because you definitely don't want to do that. But just like, what are some of the things that make me the right candidate for this? And you want to put those keywords into that summary statement. Often, the person who's initially scanning that resume, they're only going to read the summary statement or the objective statement. So you want to spend probably the bulk of your time thinking about how that's worded, each word that's used in there. Make sure it's the right tense, make sure it's spelled correctly. Definitely make sure it's spelled correctly. There's nothing more irritating than, being an employer and seeing some misspelled words or some grammar that's incorrect in a summary statement. That's probably the quickest way to the bottom of the big stack of paper. All right, so another thing about the summary statement is you want to include professional characteristics that may be helpful in winning that interview. And this would be maybe specific to that job. A lot of times in my summary statement, for instance, that's the only thing that I'll change when I'm going for a different job. I'll only change the summary statement. Everything else is the same. All of the employment history, the educational history, the certifications, anything like that, that's all the same. Okay, the only thing that's going to change, and that makes it so easy to adapt my resume to whatever job that I'm going to, is I only have to change one or two words in that summary statement. How do you write a summary statement? So remember, these are things to remember. What makes you the ideal candidate? Think about that when writing your summary statement. What are the qualities that the employer cares about the most? Pick statements that best demonstrate why they should hire you. Think about that. And a summary statement can be easily changed, like I said, to fit a specific job. So the next section of a resume is going to be your experience, your work experience. You can even put as a title, work experience or just experience. And so some of the important things about this section of the resume are that you need to list jobs in reverse chronological order. Rather than starting from the beginning and going to the end, you want to start with the end, the most recent. And hopefully, if you're still employed, you'll see maybe you got a job back in 2018. Then what you'll want to do is put 2018 to present. okay? And just always keep it to the year. I don't think the exact date is as important. And they're only going to scan this, remember. So stick with the year. But list them in reverse chronological order. Then go with the job that you had before that, and so on and so forth. Focus on the most recent or relevant jobs. Focus on those and make those a little bit, make sure that they're going to be noticed if and when that resume is being scanned that far down in. Also include the title, the name of the firm, the city and state of the firm, and like I said, the years that you worked there, between 2018 and present, or between 2015 and 2019, I worked here. So that's how you do that. Make sure that's included in that experience. The next section or segment of the resume is going to be your education. And once again, just like experience, this is going to be in reverse chronological order. Like whatever your last major educational achievement is, that's what you want to start with, and then you go back from there. Like if you received a master's degree, then and that was the achievement in education, that's what you want to start with, moving back to your bachelor's degree, and then anything else prior to that bachelor's degree. You don't want to put any details about the college except for any major distinctions or awards that you may have received from that college or that university, especially if it pertains to that field of work that you're going into or that you're applying for. You only want to include your GPA, your grade point average, if it's over, I would say 3.4. Is a good one to put in there. You definitely don't want to put like a 2.3 or a 1.9. You definitely don't want to put that in there. But if you have like a 3.4 or above, you can go ahead and include that GPA average in your educational summary. And also then you want to make sure that your education is listed after the job experience or that experience section. Unless you just completed a degree and you're going in that field, then you may want to put that you may want to put the education before, but generally speaking, you want to make sure that the education portion comes after the experience portion. You can include in your resume any professional affiliations. This is optional. It's certainly not required. But if you have significant professional affiliations or associations that are directly associated or affiliated with the job that you're applying for, or that that the employer would be impressed that you worked over here, or you did that with that person, or with that committee in the city, or whatever it may be. If it's a professional affiliation, okay, make sure a professional affiliation. Then you can include a short, this doesn't have to be a long section, but a short section on that. That may grab their attention, okay? And only use those that are current or relevant and very impressive. And include leadership roles. If you had a leadership role, if it's appropriate, if you were the chairman of the board, or you were the vice president, or you were the treasurer or the secretary on a board or on a committee, it may be impressive to share those types of things, especially if you're going after a position where those types of experiences and those types of positions would be attractive to that employer. Okay, now let's go over a few guidelines. And like I said, some of this is repeating, but it bears repeating because it's very, very important. Remember, that resume is going to be your first and foremost tool to get you that interview, to land that interview. You want to remember, you want to go from that very thick pile of paper into that very small pile of paper. Okay, that's the goal of the resume. So here are some guidelines to remember. You want it to be visually enticing. A lot of times I've looked at resumes that are very wordy and there's a lot of black on the page. There's a lot of that writing on the page. There's very little color on the page. It's all in the same font. And sometimes it looks kind of like that can make it look a little laboring, a little boring. Maybe like there's a little bit too much information. Like, man, I'm not going to take the time to look through all of that. And you want it, like some of the more impressive resumes there's a lot of that. If the page is white, white on the page. And there's a lot of maybe color mixed in, not bold colors, but just like, real subtle colors. That you want to make it visually enticing. Use different types of font, not for everything, but just kind of, specify. Like in your titles, like experience or education, you may want to embolden those or underline them or make them a little bit bigger font. And then the actual experience, the actual, like the educational portion, those are in slightly smaller font that are maybe italicized or maybe they're not emboldened. So just things like that, break it up a little bit, make it interesting to look at, make it attractive to look at. You want it to be visually enticing. You also want it to be uniform and consistent. Don't use, make it so different that you've taken away from the uniformity of your resume. Absolutely no errors. You double check, triple check. Have somebody else proofread it for you, edit it for you. Make sure you've got commas where they belong. Make sure you have correct pronunciation, correct grammar, definitely correct spelling. If you kind of wonder about that, Google it. Make sure that you have the right spelling for every word that you use. And don't worry about using too much language that's so articulate or so intelligent that you kind of lose your authenticity. So you just want to make sure that there are absolutely no errors in that resume. You want to make it targeted. You want to be focused about what make sure you know what you're trying to communicate in this section. Make sure you're going right to the target. Highlight strengths that will add value to the employer. Always be thinking of an employer. When you're doing a resume, am I providing what they're looking for? Am I best suited for this job? Why am I? And you want to kind of target their needs. Employers like to feel important, and so they want to know that you recognize that they're important. So highlight those strengths. Use action words. These would be tasks that you know that you can do and that you can do them well. So use action words in your resume. So remember, number one, shorter is better. Remember, have a lot of white on that page. Don't use be very wordy or just get into all sorts of explanations about things. And just make sure that you remember shorter is better, definitely. Use the experience or put the experience portion of your resume before education most of the time. Okay, the only exception I can really think of is if you're you don't have a whole lot of work experience, but you just graduated with a master's degree in the field that you're applying for. That would be the only time that I may consider putting education ahead of experience. Also, and this is so important, a telephone number that is going to be answered. Okay? And make sure that if you can't answer the phone all the time, that your voicemail message is a professional voicemail message. I remember one time, and I had a job where I could do this, but on my voicemail it was like, when you hear the beep, you know what to do, you know how to do it. And, if I were actually looking for a job, that would not be an appropriate voicemail message to have, an employer. They're like, well, what is that? And so you want to make sure that your voicemail message is professional and is going to prompt the employer to say, oh boy, that sounds really good. You may get hired or be considered for that job just based on the tone of your voice in that voicemail message. So remember to have a phone number that you will answer. And if you receive a voicemail, that you'll immediately listen to that voicemail, return it, and make sure that voicemail message is professional. And then also a lot of communication, employment-related communication, when you're looking for a job, is going to be done through email. So make sure that you have a professional email address. You may have to change your email address. You definitely don't want something that when you're younger, sometimes you use some really catchy things that are attractive to your friends. You want to make sure that your email address has a professional flavor to it when you're dealing with employers and getting employment and that sort of thing. Okay, so what not to put on a resume? And I'll just go down through these real quickly. We've already elaborated on some of these things. So what not to put on a resume? Fluffy, rambling statements. Don't get too wordy. Don't ever put any salary information on a resume. Full addresses of former employers, okay? Accurate full addresses of former employers. You definitely don't want to put on the resume, and remember, we're not putting these things on a resume. You don't need, you can just be basic. You can just be, just general when it comes to this. Don't ever put on a resume your reasons for leaving jobs. If they want to know that, they can ask that in the interview, and then at that point, you want to make sure that you have good answers for those types of questions. But don't put it on a resume. Don't include a personal section where you would talk about your opinions or your hobbies or your interests. Often that kind of thing can actually take away from or even ruin your opportunities for employment with that company. Don't put names of your supervisors on there unless you're using somebody as a reference, but you may want to check that out. But be very careful about using names of previous supervisors or current supervisors when you're putting that information on a resume. Don't do that. Don't put references on a resume. You can always include a statement that says references are available upon requests, but you don't really need to put references on the resume unless the employer is asking specifically for references. You can always include that in a separate section or a different document. And then don't write the word resume at the top of your resume. So sometimes I've seen resumes where in big, huge, bold letters, resume. It's like, we know it's a resume. You're submitting it. You don't really need to put that. It wastes space anyway. And sometimes that can be a little irritating to employers. All right. So also just remember to do your job searches, look for what that employer's looking for, find out what those keywords are. Put a lot of time into that summary or objective statement and make sure that you include what needs to be included. Keep it real simple and shorter is better. And that concludes our workshop here on creating a resume. Hopefully that'll give you some guidelines and really help you out in creating that resume. And you may receive one or two little points that are really, really going to help you or that are going to cause you to go back and change your resume a little bit. But let's make it professional, and hopefully you can land that interview and you can land that job. You have a great day.